Good evening and welcome to tonight's City Council meeting for Monday, September 23rd, 2024. We have with us Deputy Clerk Javara for the first meeting that you're running. So I will ask you to please take the roll and welcome aboard.
Thank you. Mayor McCacken.
Here.
Assistant Mayor Kelly. Is she connecting via Zoom?
She is via Zoom. I see her on there.
Should we go back to her?
It says she's talking, but no sound.
Assistant Mayor.
There she is. We can
See
see
her.
her.
Okay. All right.
Briefly.
Briefly.
We'll count that as a yes.
A visual.
Counselor Tabor.
Here.
Counselor Cook.
Here.
Counselor Denton.
Here.
Counselor Blaylock.
Present.
Counselor Bagley.
Here.
Counselor Moreau.
Here.
Counselor Lombardi.
Here.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have on our agenda the acceptance of minutes.
I make a motion to accept the minutes of August 5th, 2024.
Second.
And we'll do a roll call vote.
Assistant Mayor Kelly.
Nope, we just don't have,
We don't have audio.
Still waiting on the audio, Kevin, on that?
he just put up one finger.
Oh, that's it. Yeah,
He's working
that's
on
it.
it.
Working on it? Okay, we'll come back to it.
Counselor Tabor.
Yes.
Counselor Cook.
Yes.
Counselor Denton.
Yes.
Counselor Blaylock.
Yes.
Counselor Bagley.
Yes.
Counselor Moreau.
Yes.
Counselor Lombardi.
Yes.
Mayor McCacken.
Yes. All right, while we're figuring that out, we'll open it up to public comment.
Do you want to do recognitions
Oh,
first?
sorry, totally forgot recognitions here, yeah.
Can't forget him.
Didn't forget. So we have maybe I'm just like subconsciously not accepting the fact that Brian Getz has decided that he is going to leave Portsmouth and move over to manage the Water District of Rye. I'm also just a little peeved that they've poached probably, the best person in the state to do this, if not the region and up there with the country. We've set the standard because of the work that Brian has led in terms of our water quality, and we are very sad to see him go. And it's something that, when you think about what a city does, providing clean, safe, reliable drinking water is at the top of the list. And although it didn't always get all of the public comment, it didn't get none of the public comment. There was a lot of people that were as enthusiastic of what Brian has done. And I think back to when we were in probably the beginning of what was just a sea change in terms of how we think about water with regard to PFAS and the chemicals that pollute water. Brian led the charge at Pease. We were lucky to have him there. That's over a decade ago. I was lucky enough to serve with Brian on the Safe Water Advisory Committee. Learned a lot about that. I know continues to serve on that. I don't know if we have restrictions on citizenship or residency for that, Brian. So maybe that's something you could fill out for again in the future. But the work that you did, and I'm going to read off a couple of accolades here. President of the New Hampshire Waterworks Association, chaired the New England Waterworks Association Water Resource Committee, and just last week received the David M. Erickson Groundwater for Excellence in the field of groundwater science, supply, development, management, and protection. Brian, it's can't spin it. We're not going to be able to replace you because nobody can replace you. We're grateful that you served us. We're happy that Rye is going to benefit from your knowledge, your expertise, your humble attitude, your happy warrior just view on incrementally improving this, and it's a big loss for us, and we're gonna certainly we're gonna miss you, but we don't want to let that stand in the way of just saying thank you on behalf of the 23,000 people that live here. You know, that doubles on a weekend. We are in your debt for all that you've given to the city, and we appreciate the hard work that you put in. So I know that Acting City Manager Suzanne Woodland would like to say a few things. She's worked with you on some small projects throughout your time here as well.
So, Brian, I want to thank you for your leadership at Public Works. Upon the completion of any project of significance or other job well done, you've time and time again recognized the contributions of our city staff. You've also recognized the efforts of residents, contractors, and other stakeholders in a project. It was never just about you. It was about the whole team and everyone coming together to solve a problem. And I really appreciate the fact that you see everyone's effort and you acknowledge it. I think that is a mark of leadership, and I'm very happy to rejoice in that aspect of your being. I also wanted to thank you for, finding a path through conflicting views, sort of that middle road between no action and reaction. It's a hard path to hoe or to take, and I think you've taken it admirably to the benefit of this community. And as many here will know, Brian has always been the master of the water statistics, and we will miss that, as well as the rate model data. And so we are backfilling at Public Works and in the Finance Department to be able to fill the large shoes that Brian has in that field. And of course, he also helped bring us the Think Blue, which with our lovely little blue fish mascot, and all the efforts you've done to promote water quality and good practices. So really, from all of us, the staff side, thank you. We will miss you. We do know where to find you, but we do wish you well.
Would you like to say a few words, Brian? We're not going to put the clock on for you.
Well, I could wait till next week, and as a resident, I have my 3 minutes, so you feel free to start the clock. Well, thanks. Wonderful words. I can't. I'm very humbled by that and the recognition. And as I've said repeatedly, I was not looking for another job. Rye has some challenges with their own wells and needs to treat PFAS, and they were looking for someone that might help manage them. So they coerced, I don't know if that's the final word, but Suzanne, you stole some of my speech, so thank you very much for acknowledging what was done, and people give me credit for certain things, and through my career, I've been in and out of working for the city. I've been a consultant for the city. I've been a consultant for other communities, and while I was here in this position, always saying the best things about the city and the support from the top down. City manager, previous city manager, working with the legal team, deputy city manager Woodland, and on the PFAS issues and stuff. And I couldn't say enough about the staff, Peter Rice and all of DPW. The support staff there is great. Just a excellent backstop. So there will be people to backfill, and I'm comfortable with that in a certain degree. But again, I'll only be just down the road. And lastly, some of the things we've implemented, Think Blue, the efficiencies, and that, I've got to credit the councils, both this one and previous ones, because, I have peers that want to do things, and they propose them, and they don't necessarily get the support from the overall regulating body, because, things cost money, and, we have both, as a community, made initiatives, but also put the money forward to do that, which takes the council's approval. So Again, thank you to the council, and thanks for the great words, and wish everybody well, too. Thanks.
Thanks, Brian. So next up, public comment. We will start with Mary Lou McElwain on police facility.
Good evening, Mary Lou McElwain, 259 South Street, City Councilors, Mayor, Legal Department. I'm basing my comments on Jeff McMenemy's column reporting in today's Portsmouth Herald, but I do plan to stay for the presentation. I do think that any addition to the police station that goes out across the parking lot to possibly the length that John Tabor referred to the 9/11 monument will obstruct. And it will obstruct whether it's 1 story or 4 stories. And it will obstruct the wonderful treasured view that we have coming up to in front of City Hall, coming up Junkins Avenue, no matter whether it's 1 story, as I said, or 4 stories. And it will obstruct the air and the light and the view to the residents of Connors Cottage. Connors Cottage, I believe, is on the National Historic Registry. The members, the residents of the Connors Cottage had a petition, and they came to speak at City Council objecting to an addition that comes in front of this wonderful building. So that's really where I'm coming from. Obstruction is just not acceptable. And if we wanted a view that we have right now, we would have to stand on top of the addition that would go out there, whether it's 1 story, as I said, 1 story or 4 stories, it will obstruct. So you did get, I know, a number of objections to the previous plan, and I know this has been downgraded, but it's still, let's take a look at the effect that it really will have on this entire area, this treasured site. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary Lou. Next up, Sue Polidora on the topic of history.
Hi, good evening. Sue Polidora, Middle Street. It so happened every so often I would like to come before the council and give you a little history 3-minute bite to create more appreciation for our local history. It so happened that the subject that I selected for tonight, when looking up the dates, is about the Battle of Flamborough Head, which that picture that we have over there depicts. That battle happened September 23rd, 1779. So today is the 245th anniversary of it. I did not know that yesterday, but it was like, what a coincidence. That battle there are 2 connections to Portsmouth on that battle. It's a battle between the Bonhomme Richard, a ship that was commanded by John Paul Jones. Everybody hopefully knows who he was, a local agent. And there is another connection, and his name is Captain Nathaniel Kennard. By a series of circumstances, Nathaniel Kennard is also on board that ship. And the Bonhomme Richard and the Serapis became involved in mortal combat. That's where you see those 2 ships get tangled up in battle. The Bonhomme Richards, John Paul Jones's ship, is on fire. The captain of the other ship tells them, "Give up, strike your colors." John Paul Jones says, "I haven't yet begun to fight." That's a famous phrase that he is credited for. He ended up winning the battle. The Bonhomme Richard was lost. He transferred his crew to the Serapis. And as it goes, the rest of the story just elevated John Paul Jones in the history books. However, the other man, Nathaniel Kennard, he ends up being recaptured by the British and put in a ship as a slave kind of prisoner ship. He ends up in the Caribbean at the same time that there is a boat from Portsmouth there doing trade on the Trade Triangle. They notice that there is someone in there, there's an American in there. They help him escape and jump ship. Captain Kennard came to Portsmouth, ended up marrying someone here, became a sea captain. Then he became one of the officers dealing with the ship at shipping events in Portsmouth. Captain Nathaniel Kennard is buried in the North Cemetery, and he is one of the few people who was at that battle with John Paul Jones at that particular time, 245 years ago. And now you know the rest of the story.
Thank you very much,
However,
Sue.
before I leave, I would like to ask and see if it's possible to put at least a little light in there so it just doesn't look, it's dark because the battle happened at night, and that's the artist's depiction. But if we put a little light in there, maybe people would be more intrigued to take a closer look at the history next to it.
Thank you,
So,
Sue.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Next up is Roy Helsel on question on development.
Good evening, Roy Helsel, Middle Road. Question on city development. City management, has the city management thought about the future of city water and sewage and when they plan to enlarge both with all the development? Or is this going to skip through the crack like the rezoning of Islington Creek that the residents asked for back in 2019 so they would not overdevelop the CD5 downtown overlay that is being overdeveloped at this time? And the people of that area were just disregarded, it seems like, by the city. Are the residents and homeowners second to the developers? Is this an oversight of the city's planning section, or was it just in favor of the developers? New developers want to build a welfare sharing, high-density, co-living housing in downtown Portsmouth in the historical core near Market Square. Sharing, sleeping, kitchen, bathroom facilities in this day and age is in other words, downtown flop house. Is this what our city really needs? Are developers paying their share for the water and sewage usage and for the required upgrades of the city water and sewage needs? Or are the homeowners paying for all of this development? And what about the taxes? This is all costing the city a question. Are they going to help pay for it too? Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Next up is Francis Cormier on the topic of the police station.
Francis Cormier, Melbourne Street. I listened to the Monday morning quarterbacks, talk about, oh, they did this and they did that. So it's like I got to speak now, forever hold my peace about this police station and what you got planned here. I'll give you a story. About a month ago, one of the officers called me and to come to the police station and fill out a form because I was a witness in an assault and battery in downtown. And so I came and, I walked into the police station and I'm standing there, no one's there. It's this big empty room. Hello, anyone here? And finally someone came And I told them, you know, one of the officers wants me to fill out a form. So she said, well, I'll be back. And I waited, and then finally an officer came out with the paper, and I filled out the form. And, you know, I asked myself, why do you need a new police station that's empty? There's no one in there. And before I came here, just now, about a half hour ago, I stopped in. I went in there. No one's around. I'm staring. Anyone here? I look in the windows. I look back. You know, you got all this room back there. I don't see anybody. So you gotta spend $42 million to build a new police station. For what? What's wrong with this police station? It's empty as it is. Yet you need more room. It seems to me like you just want to spend money, $42 million. And in today's Portsmouth Herald, I'm going to take a small quote from paragraph 23. I hope we can act and give the police a home. Give the police a home that improves how they operate. How is building this great big monstrosity for millions and millions of dollars, because when you get done, it's going to be more than 40 million, and you're going to build this monstrosity that somehow is going to improve how they operate. I don't get it. To me, it strikes me as just another way to spend money. The way I see it, that's the police station. That's it. What you see is what you got.
Thank you, Francis. Next up, Jake Webb on PPM TV report.
Hello, hello. I'm sure you guys are getting sick of seeing me. I'm Jake Webb. I live on Monroe Street in Portsmouth, and I'm here to talk about the PPM TV proposal that is in the agenda for today. I'd like to thank Deputy City Manager Woodland for putting together some very extensive information when writing up the report for today's meeting. I'd like to address some of what PPM TV's plans are to do going forward in addition to all of that awesome information. Our fundraising efforts remain more intense and successful than ever, with no intention of slowing down. Our upcoming plans include many grant proposals, at least 6 large-scale events between now and next summer, and pursuing more significant sponsorship and underwriters. When these events come up, we'll be sure to let City Hall know. I love public television as much as anybody, dare I say more than most. But even I can't pretend that people aren't cutting the cord. That said, the shift in technology here should not mean a loss of public voices. So we have plans to increase our presence on streaming platforms, including Roku, Amazon Fire Stick, Apple TV, and more, as well as putting our Channel 6 broadcast fully onto YouTube Live, in addition to on Channel 6. These efforts, as well as some more modern program formats, will make sure that we continue to amplify all voices, regardless of the dropping fee and the dropping viewership on cable. A goal of ours that we have not emphasized enough is to further bridge the gap between the citizens and between City Hall. As Mayor McEachern said, a well-informed public is key to our democracy. During both local and national elections, we'll continue to invite candidates on our programming to discuss their platforms and ideally host debates or town halls at our studio. We also have a show in the works to invite local officials, including City Council, on to answer questions from the public or to discuss their own points of interest. Our current program, Minute with the Mayor, has a similar format and has proven to be vastly popular. The community could do more with hearing from our governing body a little bit more directly, and that's something that we hope to be able to help out with. If there's some interest in that program, please do reach out to me. We'll certainly be reaching out to you as well. Lastly, in agreement with the Deputy City Manager, I urge that the City Council reconsider the franchise fee policy in next year's budgetary process. The policy remains out of line with the norm for cities comparable to Portsmouth, ones that choose to have a public access station like our own. I will gladly be a part of these conversations, and I look forward to it going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. That's all that have signed up. Did anybody miss the sign? Oh, no, that's sorry. Elizabeth Brader, on the topic of the first reading.
Your Honor, I think we have a resident that.
Oh, we have a resident who. Oh, just come and speak, and then Elizabeth, you got it.
Hi, my name is Cameron Horak. I live on Lincoln Avenue, and I'd like to briefly discuss the proposed investment in a new police station. So before I get into that, I do want to quickly acknowledge, and the heartfelt words at the beginning of this session speak to this. We're fortunate to have some of the greatest public servants in the area, if not the region or the country. We have fantastic people working for our city, and we certainly don't want to jeopardize that. That being said, as someone who lives in town and is fairly conversant with how to evaluate making this sort of major investment, I have questions about how we're evaluating the investment, the criteria, and where we can potentially evaluate other comparable investments made by neighboring communities. I'd like to start by looking back to 2015, when Dover built a police station and adjoining parking garage for $9 million. If for the sake of conversation, we assume that parking garage cost 4 of the 9, and we adjust for inflation and assume that the police station component costs $20 million, a town with more than 10,000 more residents than we have, and significantly more crime, was able to develop a brand new police station for a fraction of the cost of what we're proposing in a town with next to no crime. At a time where we're also evaluating the cost of living and increases in taxes, it's hard for me to wrap my head around how a $45 million investment, 42.5, whatever the number may be, when we finalize the plans, is something that's feasible for this community. Not to mention the fact that once you consider the interest on a bond of that size, we're talking about an investment much closer to $100 million. That's a number that's not widely published, and it's not something that we're really talking about in the public discourse at this time, is the total cost. Not the upfront cost, not the bond. What is the all-in cost to the taxpayer, including principal and interest? And as a young member of this community, it's just something that's very concerning to see us looking at making such a massive investment when there is no precedent in any neighboring communities, none that are even remotely similar to ours. So with that, I hope that the council can spend some time thinking about the efficacy of this investment and whether or not this is appropriate in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you, William. So your name one more time? Cameron Horat?
Horak, Horack. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Cameron.
My pleasure.
Next up, back to Elizabeth Bratter.
Good evening. Elizabeth Bratter, property owner, 159 McDonough Street. It is my understanding that the Gateway Neighborhood Overlay District is proposed. This is a great idea, and it offers the opportunity to transform office commercial into residential. The proposed version needs careful review and may need to go back to committee for some tweaking. There is a big difference between having 200 people who come in the morning and are there from 8 to 5 and living next to, or having 200 people living next to you, perhaps with a bar, grill, or live music until 11 o'clock. This overlay district turns commercial into residence on the top floors and commercial on the bottom. However, the added uses presented in 10.684 of this proposal have no restrictions on them to protect existing neighborhoods and mixed-use areas. Fine-tuning the wording could prevent issues for neighborhoods and the planning and zoning boards in the future. It needs to be understood that many of the OR are next to SRB and other lower residential areas with no restrictions regarding commercial. For example, a 200-person restaurant could be added to a GNOD structure without a variance. However, the GNOD could add more reflective details, such as allowed if more than 200 feet from existing residential and mixed-use zoning. Remembering that restaurants of any size are not permitted in SRB or in OR. Details could be put into place for the public assembly and function rooms to limit size, hours of use, and the distance between the GNOD and the existing residential and mixed uses zoning that are already there who have not had this next to them. It also should include outdoor seating. In regards to parking, shared parking only works if commercial places are open when residents are away. Shared parking is a great idea. However, the overflow could end up in abutting neighborhoods. The concept in 10.685 may need to come with hours of operation restrictions or limits on the number of businesses open past 6 p.m. per the parking area or buildings. There's lot line setbacks proposed in the GNOD are way too close. Imagine living in your 10 to 20 foot tall home and having a 60-foot building 10 feet from your lot line. Utilizing the allowed setback of the existing zoning is reasonable. There could be a setback clause which would allow this 10-foot zone for buildings within the GNOD that do not abut a residential neighborhood. You want to think about the fact that the setback should be 20 feet, because if you're going to try to work on a building that's 10 or 60 feet tall, you're going to need to get a ladder in there next to it, and 10 feet is not going to be enough. The minimum open space in Portsmouth for various locations is significantly more than this. It would be reasonable to ask for 15 to 20% of open space. The Director of Planning there's a lot more, it's in my letter. I think that this is a great idea, but I think that there needs to be some more specific details in it, or it's going to open up a big can of worms, and you never know what kind of unintended consequences will happen if this is not made more detailed. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So with that, any public comment? Is there a move to suspend the rules and bring up presentation?
Yes, Your Honor, I'd move we suspend the rules and move up 13A, police station.
Second.
All in favor? I could have just pretended to forget that, but we'll do a roll call.
Assistant Mayor Kelly.
Yes.
Counselor Tabor.
Yes.
Counselor Cook.
Yes.
Counselor Denton.
Yes.
Counselor Blaylock.
Yes.
Counselor Bagley.
Yes.
Counselor Moreau.
Yes.
Counselor Lombardi.
Yes.
Mayor McEachran.
Yes. So we have Peter Rice and Joe Almeida leading this. Oh, you're a pro now. You're a pro.
Good evening, Mayor, councilors. We're back before you tonight, as we said we would, with some further development on the site selection process for the community policing facility. And I do want to remind everyone listening, we are still within the site selection phase of this project. If you could go to the next slide first. This is kind of an outline of where we're going to go, but I'd like to jump right in it. What we've heard from you previously, and not just from the council, but we heard from the community, is that we are tasked, and we're primarily with, we need to meet the needs of this police department. We need to stay within a total project budget of $42.2 million as defined in the capital improvement plan. And it was after an exhaustive search for sites, as you remember, we looked at several sites throughout the city that could accommodate a building, a development of this size, and primarily we were also looking at land that we already own, because buying a 4-acre site in Portsmouth, as you could imagine, as we stated before, would be crippling to the project budget. So we were bound by city-owned property. And we were directed by this council to remain on this campus with the site selection, which eliminated the 4 other outlying sites, which came at a much larger cost, as you remember. The other thing we heard loud and clear was to utilize as much of the existing police facility as possible, which we have done. And the last time that we saw you, I'm sure everyone remembers, we presented you with an area on this site that met all of those needs, but it did have a significant impact on the view shed on the front of this building. We want to present to you tonight development on that same site, which significantly reduces impact to the view, but checks all of the boxes on what we've been charged to do within budget, on campus, meets the needs of the department, and utilizes as much of the existing station as possible. Next slide, please. Also, the last time I was at this podium, we talked about the staffing needs assessment being done by a third-party firm, which we continue to negotiate fee and scope of that. We are continuing that. We don't have results of that yet, but we would like to continue in parallel developing this site and working on that, confirming staffing needs at the same time. Also, it's worth saying again, the other on-site options that we reviewed, and I know we have a limited time tonight, we weren't planning on presenting all of the sites that failed because we were much more interested in showing you the site that will work. We looked at several other locations on this campus to put this facility. As you know, the lower lot was one. The rear of this building, right outside this side door, was another one. All of them came with complications and cost that eliminated them from contention. Next slide, please. This is the proposed site plan for the I'm sorry. This is the proposed site plan for the community policing facility. The building doesn't necessarily have to remain exactly this shape. We're showing you in blue the areas that are prime for constructing this site on the front of the building. As you can see, the driveway that currently exists remains almost in the same exact location. We've had to shift it to the left slightly. We're making it two-way so the public can come up and down that same direction. We are leaving the other entrance that comes up the hill, that's remaining unchanged in this proposal. Public parking remains in the same place. This dramatically decreases the view impact to and from City Hall, and we do have a few slides that show that. Before we leave this slide, as you can see, the addition goes out. The facade of the addition goes out a bit further quite a bit further, as you can see in the drawing. It goes over the road, the access road for the PD, and that little side road that they currently use now as an exit becomes two-way for the department, which is a great improvement. It dramatically decreases traffic on residential streets behind, further minimizing the impact. Next slide, please. Difficult to imagine yourself standing in these little, the map is large, but we know from elevations that we have studied that the little red box that you see down in the lower right-hand corner would be the extent of the development. The sight lines from under the canopy as you leave City Hall is one study. The other study shows from the parking lot is greatly expanded from previously, but clearly that we are going to have impact to sight lines to and from. There's just no way to avoid it if we're putting a building on the front, but we clearly have minimized it significantly from before. Next slide, please. This is a study showing that as you're in the Connors Cottage, we believe that there are going to be there's going to be visual relief as on the upper floors that look over the building, because we're actually not going up very high with this building. We're more going out so that there's opportunity within the cottage to look over the development. Next slide, please. Now, we all remember the previous slide, which is on the top of the screen, which was met with disapproval. The current plan, we wanted to put the same exact view, same exact photograph, and we wanted the picture to be developed to the same level of detail that shows a significant difference in impact to the view of the cottage. Now remember, I can't say this enough, these are massing diagrams. We'd like to leave here tonight with a level of confidence to proceed with this site so that we can develop this further with materials and perhaps fenestration, windows, which will further soften the impact and start to overlay some actual architecture on it. But this in fact represents our best solution for putting the building on the front of this campus with minimal impact at budget. Next slide, please. We are still working with the same professional estimating firm that you might recognize the graphics here. It's the same firm we've been using all along. They have studied this option and have come up with it's coincidence that it's come in so close to the budget. This is the cost of that graphic that you just saw. I believe there's another slide, is there not? Yeah, so again, I stated that we'd like to be confident in our next steps. We'd like the council to give us confidence to continue moving in this direction. The staffing needs study will be completed and we can report back to you. We'd like to advance this design if it's met with some acceptance to overlay some basic rendering and get an understanding of what the architecture might be for the campus. We will consistently update the budget estimates as we go throughout the project. Actually, we'll never just stop estimating this. We'll always be checking the budget on this. We'd like to go through some presentations to land use boards to get some further input from them. Another opportunity for the public to comment and perhaps help mold the architecture of this building. And lastly, anticipated bond authorization for additional design funds in 2025. Peter, do you have, I wanted to give you the opportunity to speak if you had anything additional to add, but we were aware of our time constraints and we wanted to leave an opportunity for questions, but that truly concludes our abridged presentation tonight.
Joe, questions of the council? Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. First, I just wanted to say thank you for spending so much time trying to find an alternative to what was presented before. I know there was a lot of pushback from the community and from the council. I'm curious as to why, with the significant alterations of the size of the building, why we're still looking at the same budget.
The size of the building actually hasn't changed. The location of mass has changed significantly. We've pushed it very much more against the existing facility and down the hill. But the square footage is very similar to what it was previously. Because as of right now, our staff, as we've stated, the staffing needs study is being done in parallel. We believe that this square footage represents what is needed by the PD for a modern facility.
When is the staffing needs study expected to be returned?
We don't have an exact date on that yet. We will expedite that as quickly as we can, but I don't want to stand here and make up a date for you on that. We do not have a completion date for that.
Councilor Lombardi, then Councilor Bagley.
I guess I'm confused because it seems like the staffing study is pretty important to understand what the facility needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess I'm concerned about that, about, even looking at massing until we have that. The other thing is that there was a lot of emphasis on doing work on the rear of the building, and you said that it would cost more, but I might suggest that it might be worth it.
Don't know if that wasn't a question, but Councilor Bagley.
It wasn't a question.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think I've asked for this before, but it did come up in public comment. If the finance department could provide at the next presentation, if we go out to bond with the current interest rates, and if it's a 20-year or 30-year bond, what the annual tax levy impact would be on the taxpayer. My back of the envelope math says it's between $3.5 and $4 million. I also think, I know I'm in the minority, but I got a lot of panic phone calls and messages over the assessment. I don't think it's a terrible idea to hit the pause button on a $42.5 million project until that resolves itself with the new tax rate and people know what their taxes are going to be going forward.
Thank you, Councilor Bagley. I was just looking for, is there other questions? Where's I'm trying to find in the it'd be helpful in these to see, what the previous one, so the building, the addition is the same size at 31,000 square feet?
Yes.
Okay, and that was the previous one at the same size?
Yes, just a different configuration.
Okay.
It's more linear. This one is, yep.
Okay, and then I know we had asked, and so we're still straining the same amount of space in this building?
Yeah, 20,000 square feet.
Okay. That's the hardest thing for me to wrap my head around is stranding 20,000 square feet to build.
Oh, I'm sorry, you said stranding. We're reusing 20,000 square feet of the
what
station.
What are we stranding?
We're stranding actually the lowest quality spaces in this building, which are beneath, they're immediately beneath what we call the admin building, not Cybolt, but admin, and beneath where conference room A is and the low roof. These are some of the spaces that have proven to have absolutely no air exchange. The ceiling heights are extremely low. Remember, we're working within 3 different buildings here. The 20,000 square feet that we're reutilizing is in the furthest end of the building, the 1962 hospital building. That construction is much better. The ceiling heights are better. The plenums are higher. But the spaces that have proven to be problematic in this building, where we've had, it's been stated publicly, there have been mold issues in the past, which we've dealt with. We've had mice, rat infestations, which we've dealt with. Most of that occurs in this space that is, I always refer to as the worst space within City Hall. And there's no light, there's no access, there's no possibility of windows. In a lot of cases, there's no room for ductwork to even travel through a plenum because the ceiling heights are extremely low. Those are the areas that we are removing from PD use. They could potentially be reused in the future for storage. As facilities manager, I would never support putting people back down into those spaces as office space or, as occupied rooms. Perhaps they could be mechanical rooms, storage rooms, that type of thing. But that's the square footage we're trying to stay away from. That's what's been creating a problem for this department for years.
Okay, and so that's going to depend back on the space needs or the staffing requirement report to say if we're going to stay at 50,000 square feet.
Right. So we've done, as you know, and it's all on the city's website on the project page, we've done space needs assessments that determine, based on how many staff we have now, what space is required for that staff. So the staffing needs assessment is different to that, where it determines if the number of staff is correct. So it confirms what our current assumptions are on numbers of staff within the building.
Okay, and we recently got the Chief McClellan and the fire recently got a grant to support education and training, and that's going to be happening out at Fire Station 2, as I understand. I could be incorrect on that.
I believe that's true.
So has there been can we check off the box that it's not more cost effective to have satellite offices within other municipal safety buildings that we currently have?
Multiple stations, you're asking?
To align those with the stations we currently already have.
Yeah, I wasn't prepared to speak to that in any great detail tonight, but I know that we have had several discussions with this council about satellite state. This question's been asked before about multiple stations versus one large station, it has proven to be something that is not necessarily more cost-effective. And I could let Chief speak to that if you really want to go into more detail about that now. That would be fine.
Sure, maybe like as a hypothetical, we could take dispatch and put it in Fire Station 2.
Yeah.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. As far as that works, the majority of the dispatch operations is used in the police department. They do have a part with the fire department, but the dispatch center that we have at Station 2 is a redundancy center, which is an emergency backup center for our current facility, and is not a big enough space to accommodate a full-time dispatch.
Right, I'm just thinking in terms of like, is it more, like, just need to see that it's not more cost-effective with no reduction in efficacy to have that site expanded and go from the backup to the primary, save the space here, so we don't have to have as much, I guess, cost and just space.
Yeah, I understand. I guess what I'm saying is the dispatch center is an integral part of our inner workings on a day-to-day basis inside of the police department. So if it was not located there, it would definitely impact our workflow and efficiencies.
So on that, that's where I think it would be helpful to understand how that happens. So like I understand, like, so part of the problem, or not problem, but like, so a lot of folks have a lot of questions about the police station. We've been asking questions when it comes back to council, and then some of those questions are then gone and worked on and deliberated, from a working group perspective, and those questions probably come out and they're answered, but then they're not kind of answered back here. We just get an answer that says that this is not the way to go. It's hard for us to follow that train of thought. It's also hard for the public to then they have a bunch of questions, which is right of them to do. But understand like the simple question of why dispatch needs to be, because I could easily, I guess I understood dispatch to be, they get a call in, they call out either to somebody that's on the road already in the field, or kick it over to the fire that this is something from a 911 situation. There needs to be a fire or an ambulance dispatch. I don't, I guess, quite understand how it's integrated into the kind of the office flow of the police station.
Okay. I mean, I could sit here and explain that to you, but it's a long, cumbersome story of how they play in the everyday workings of the police department, which, I can gladly speak with the council or city members, whoever wants to hear about it at another time. I think tonight, I really wasn't prepared to talk about the inner workings and day-to-day of dispatch center.
Councilor Denton, and then Councilor Cook.
Thank you. This is more of a design question, but you might be able to answer it, Chief, because it's pretty basic. I know we just replaced the wall of the building which overlooks the South Mill Pond, but looking at the sketches here, the new station addition would be building out further over the current road onto the hill. Is there a reason why we couldn't just build out from the current building over the hill, over the road? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I'm not an architect, I'm not a builder, but I think I think just from a cost standpoint, then you get into the interworkings of the police department, whereas the way we have it designed on the new phase there is going to be a space built specifically for certain functions that using part of the existing building is not going to fit, and to make it fit, comply would be additional costs and make the cost of the project more expensive than as we have it designed. I mean, at the end of the day, any idea that we have, I'm sure we could make to come fruition for a cost. It's just a matter of what do we want that cost to be, and we're trying to remain into the budget that we have in front of us.
That's fair, and I don't know if Joe has something to add to that.
I was just going to ask you to elaborate a little bit on your question. It sounds like you're asking if we can
blow out the wall and just move further out onto the hill. opposed to the building in front.
The wall, you're talking about the existing wall that
Wall
we
we
replaced?
just replaced.
I think Chief answered that correctly. I mean, yes, we could do that. It's definitely a dramatic change in the design, and it would. Yeah, we're also very we realize the impact on the rest of the building during construction. I've been nervous from the start as the person who was in charge of taking care of this building, of the more we come into this building, we are impacting visitors, City Hall business, employees with, noise, dust, everything you can imagine during heavy construction. But of course we could do that. It comes at a cost, that's all. But if it's, to repeat what Councilor Lombardi said, if it's worth it, and this council wants us to move in that direction, we could do that. There are adjacencies for us to consider for different departments within the station. So we do need the building to resemble a specific shape and size so that these adjacencies, let's face it, we're trying to improve make dramatic improvements to the way the station works. So without those adjacencies, it won't be as effective.
Thank you both.
Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. This is a follow-on to the mayor's question around dispatch potentially being in another location. I know I asked a similar question the last time we had a work session because I grew up in a state that has a consolidated dispatch for the entire state. Yeah. So it isn't on site. Have we considered, when we're talking about efficiencies, different ways of operating that maybe reduce our needs as far as size first? And then my second question is, are we duplicating in the new spaces some of the spaces currently that will be kind of lost to that, they're saying the basement here in this location, things that maybe are outdated, that stations don't always have anymore, but we have currently in our station, and maybe we're creating a new space for that, but maybe it's not necessarily needed. Maybe we need to think about a different model of operating.
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. I can assure you that we have been through this filter multiple times with the consultants and with the department. We sit with them and go through and we truly ask them, can we reduce this one room by 100 square feet, 10 square feet? What could it be? I am sure that we have no redundant spaces that aren't needed in our current program. Now, again, we will develop this to a floor plan level eventually when we all feel comfortable to get there. Those floor plans will take it to a much higher level of detail where we have rooms, actual every single room dimensioned, and conceptual and schematic design phases, design development, final drawings. But that would be the opportunity to, when things start to clarify, get more clear on exact spaces and exactly where they are, where we would have the opportunity to do that.
I guess, and one other follow-on. Whenever you do a project like this, you always have to do kind of a cost-benefit analysis.
Yep.
And, at what point, clearly we have a functioning police station. We have a fantastic police force. They're doing a fantastic job in their current space. At what point do we look at this and say, where does that cost-benefit line, where do we cross it and say, this is just too much? It's not worth the added benefit we're going to receive. That's not a question I can expect you to answer.
Thank you.
It's the question that's in my head
Yes,
all the time,
yes.
because I'm looking at $42.2 million and thinking we have a functioning police force, and yes, maybe we're getting more efficiencies. But that's the question I'm going to be really continuing to ask, is what is it worth to have just a little more efficiency in our operations? Is it worth $42.2 million financed over X number of years?
Yep, I appreciate that question as a taxpayer, that's for sure. I appreciate that question.
Councilor Blaylock, then Councilor Moreau.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have a couple questions, I guess. This is my first time seeing the new massing. Is there any possibility to give more of the view to go up above the initial part that's more closer to the admin building. Like you have you have blocks here. So if you go 2 blocks out and went up from there, just as a visual.
Yeah, excellent question, and I was pushing for that myself. When we start to go multi-level, we lose those adjacencies that are so important to the new facility. Certain departments have to be next to each other to function properly. And I was really an advocate for let's go as high as we can towards this building, and we completely lost the adjacencies that we've been working so hard to achieve when we did that.
I am anxious to see the staffing needs with the independent consultant. I think that's important. I certainly don't want to rush before we have the information. And just to be nitpicky, is there a gym or like a weight room included in these plans?
We plan on utilizing the existing gym.
Okay.
Yeah, there is not a new gym.
Yeah, I was, you know what I mean, we're going for a community policing facility. In my head, we have Spinnaker Point, there's multiple gyms around town. I don't know if it would be better, more community, to have police officers working next to, residents and stuff like that, instead of, hiding them in their own private gym. But that'd be something that could alleviate some square footage.
Yeah, if you want further detail on that, the chief can answer. Obviously, the station itself is a secure facility. It's not open to the public, and having officers out of that station, it would have to defer to the chief on that. But the good news is we're not proposing a new gym anyway. So
just had a quick point on the question that was raised by the adjacencies. So I guess from a standpoint of thinking whether or not we need a new police station or doing work on this, I would encourage, I don't know if you do tours for the general public, but there's a lot that's wrong in terms of the basement of the building. Regardless of whether or not people have done the work there and made it work, thinking, simply on the evidence room that we saw and the need to secure those facilities, where everybody was in terms of in the desks where they're filling out paperwork. There's a lot that can be improved there, and I'll say that, till I'm blue in the face, that we need to figure out a better solution. I think what would be helpful in order to do that is understand the term adjacencies. Now, I want to make sure that we get a first-rate police station that we are able to be proud of and supports the men and women that keep us safe. What I want to understand is the efficiency gained with adjacencies, and then how much that costs us, and whether or not it's something that can be worked around. It might not be perfect in order to deliver what we actually need, but those are the types of trainings. It's difficult. I don't want to get into like an ROI calculator on it, but when we hear the adjacencies of having folks on second floors, what does that mean in terms of a response time? What does that mean in terms of a efficiency? How many more cases can somebody go through based on these adjacencies? Mm-hmm. I think that would be the type to complement whatever comes out of the. I'm not necessarily thinking that we're going to see a giant shift in the assessment, although now that we don't have it, we'll probably need it. In terms of the working hour or what are we referring to this? The staffing needs assessment. I'm not expecting to see that those are dramatically different than they were when we last did the study. But what I need to see is, are all adjacencies created equally? What happens if we're not doing that? Because that then gives us more flexibility in the building itself. And if there's trade-offs on those adjacencies, that's a conversation that I think needs to be a public conversation on what are we talking about when we're talking about these adjacencies.
Great. We can prepare a summary on that topic for sure.
Councilor Moreau?
It appears from the site plan that you provided that you're are you getting rid of the entrance to City Hall? Are we moving that entrance? Because it looks like you're kind of taking.
Public comment's
that
going to be
space.
super easy, guys.
No, we're not eliminating that entrance. However, this does give us the opportunity to improve the entrance. Perhaps the entrances are shared, perhaps, but when we get into more design level. But we're coming that far up the hill with the addition. But the short answer is we are not eliminating that entrance to City Hall.
Oh, Councilor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor. Two questions possibly for you, Your Honor. Based on all the comments and questions tonight, maybe a work session might be in order. And then the second comment I'll have, and you know, this project price tag is pretty high. It'll probably be one of the highest ones that we take on. I think we need to have more than one counselor in the working group. I don't feel like we are getting enough details, in-depth details, that are difficult to ask in this forum. So I would like to see more counselors on the working group.
Okay. I have, I guess, on the working group, it's a, like, we have created we've asked for things and we've received things, but what we are missing in that exchange is the process to get there. I don't think it makes sense for us to start engineering a building through the 9 of us. I do agree that there needs to be more, we need to be able to have some of those conversations, those in-depth conversations, to understand so we can explain what that is. I'm going to take that under advisement to see how do we expand that working group to start bringing more of that conversation back to the public, not necessarily to the council. I don't think it necessarily needs to be to the council, but we need to understand more of the process that's going into the largest capital camp or project that we'll have. Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I would agree with this concern around the working group and not getting enough details, because I have so many more questions I want to ask. And I feel like then they go back to the working group and they're discussed, and they come back here and, like has been said before, we get, oh, well, we've discussed that and we've decided that it's this way. And I missed the whole discussion. So I didn't hear why my question was answered the way it was. And I need to know that answer in order to be comfortable moving forward. I personally would prefer that we didn't have a working group, that we had public meetings that were open to everyone. If you're going to have this working group, that you have public meetings of the working group, that you don't have private meetings of the group, because I think it's a disservice not just to the community who wants those answers, but it's also a disservice to the council, because we can't hear why you're moving forward in a particular manner. And I think we're going to continue to have these ongoing questions if we don't create a more open public process at this stage.
Any other questions on this?
Your Honor.
Yep. Councilor Tabor?
I'm certainly open. I was asked to be on this working group, and I think our primary question we've been trying to answer is to finalize the site. Do we want to stay here? And I think this group has worked very hard to take all the input and eliminate options that are too costly, that are off of the hill, and then bring it down to something that honors the views, because views are important in Portsmouth. And we now have a scheme that gives the full views to the top stories of Connor Cottage, and significantly reduces the mass when you look up at the hill. I just want to take issue with a couple of things that have been said in terms of cost and benefit. Public safety is a core function that the city provides, just like educating our kids is a core function. We have a high school, had a high school, and we could have said, We have an adequate high school. It may be 20, 30 years old. It may be a little tired. But, you know, when you get core functions of the city, you have to give it the infrastructure that it needs. This building is not adequate for policing today. Joe went through some of the defects it's had over the years. I would urge anyone who wants to understand that to take a tour. And you can't necessarily do a cost benefit on this, same as you couldn't for a high school or a middle school. These are lasting investments that give the men and women of the police department a home that they can work out of and work out of effectively. So, and the last thing I would say is what you're seeing tonight is not simply sketches. These do take into account the way that patrol and detective and crime lab and sally ports and transporting prisoners and interacting with dispatch and all the human interactions that happened in a 24/7 police operation. It takes into account all those and plans that space. And that's what the working group does with the police staff, the chief and his people, and the architects. And I think there's value to that. Now, should it be an open committee? That's fine. Maybe there's value to that, so that these deliberations are public. Where we needed to get to, and where we still need to get to, is to finalize that we're going to put it here, and that this siting concept is reasonable enough to proceed.
City manager, or acting city manager?
Thank you. So staff would obviously be more than willing to work if the city council wants a work session to give more time and do a longer presentation with plenty of time for Q&A with more detail. Happy to do that, or happy to go and have a public information meeting, again, with more opportunity and space. We were cognizant that we had promised to bring you an update. And so that's really what this was, is a very short update, recognizing that these types of questions would come up, and that really we want to show you where we are. And so we are happy to kind of go in either of those directions. Let me also suggest that it'll probably be at least a couple of months for the staffing needs study. I asked the question, sort of, I think, was kind of lurking in the background, which is how much more can you do before, while this staffing study takes place? What I've been told is if there is some comfort, at least with us further teasing out this scenario, then there's plenty of other work that would not get us locked in, other than it would be relative to this site and this spot out front, if you will. So we're happy to kind of, one option is we just don't do anything else really, other than maybe hold a public meeting and wait for that staffing piece to come back, because we've asked the same questions, where is the department going to be in 10 years, and how might that inform really what we want the space to look like? Looking at the efficiencies and flexibility to meet the, changing needs of the community and the police department. Or there is, like I said, some work that we can still begin to take and continue to do, because we are so early in the process, because we are still at understanding the site and the options within the site, because all the questions you've asked, we've kicked around as we've tried to do that. And if it's helpful, like I said, to schedule a time where there's more opportunity to spell out why, what we looked at in the rear of the building and why it was driving the costs up such that we didn't even bring you a picture to show, because, wow, that was really we didn't want to do something that was more expensive. So we'll go whichever direction you would like in terms of additional information.
So I think what would be helpful, just on that topic, then go to Councilor Bagley. It would be helpful to have a, it can be a work session, and certainly that's a good idea, but I think more of a presentation that's a little longer, that is public-oriented. I mean, I think certainly we can, we would likely be there, but I think things like, and I'll caveat, like, I'm excited that it's easy to remember or forget, we were talking about like $70 million somewhere else, and now we're talking $40 million here, and we're getting all the things roughly that we need. And but then it's the goalpost shift. Would love to know two things that just jump out on the design standpoint. Why the back is so much more expensive. I think the hardest thing we are dealing with here is the alternative that doesn't exist in front of us, and understanding why it would be very expensive and cost prohibitive to do that, and why it would make sense to simply go with another site outside of this. Helpful to know on that. I think Councilor Blaylock's or Councilor Denton, I didn't quite follow where we're talking about. If we're talking about why do we have a 2-story building that goes out, X number of feet when we could have a 4-story building that goes out X minus a certain amount of feet, that would be great to understand, and that's where we could get into those efficiencies and adjacencies that exist there. That, I guess, like what we see is the answers to the test that we asked the working group to do. What we don't see is the work product that went into that. That's somewhat by just the nature of having a working group, but before, I think from a standpoint of having a public group, which I'm not opposed to, but I'd like to kind of put a bow on this exercise and the work product that needs to go alongside this to say, hey, these are some of the efficiencies and adjacencies that we lose when we're doing that, so we can ask those questions. So with that, I think it would be a work session, but the work sessions just tend to us asking a bunch of questions. It would be great to have a work product session where you guys are walking through, and we spend a few hours to walk through, how we got to here and kind of the decisions that led us to here. And I know that's not what this was. This is just, we wanted to have you back, and then we started asking a bunch of questions, and that's kind of by the nature, but it's also because there's not a lot in here. This is how we got here.
That's a reasonable ask, and we do have documentation for all of those, I'll call them failed concepts that we can assemble and show you the logic of why they so quickly were.
Yep, and then, there's a bigger, aspect of, the public input on, and not so much public input, but like seeing that work product come out. The amount, not an insignificant amount of folks, like, what is this black box of the police station and how it's getting built? And my answer to them is, we have seen designs, we push back on designs, and more come back to us. But I think we're now getting into the diminishing return aspect of, we need to start seeing the math to be able to understand it and explain it to all the folks paying for it. All right, Lombardi, or Councilor Lombardi, and then Councilor Bagley.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. It's very difficult to understand the massing of a building with an elevation, just an elevation. I know, and you know, that the city has contracted three-dimensional visualization. I don't know if we still have a contract to do that. They did that with the HDC.
Yeah.
That would be much more appropriate for this scale project to have that kind of imaging available for everyone to see.
Yeah, we currently, this product is currently a Revit model which can be spun. It can be seen from, again, all the things you're asking for, we'd be happy to. It's more of a 2-hour discussion to talk in detail. And we've had a few of those, but it's time for another one. We have also, once we can move beyond, move beyond the decision to put this here, we can eventually have we can render this, photorealistic renderings that show the design and spin that, and we're just so far away from that point. But as far as the massing of our concept right now, we can show that in a three-dimensional model, and we can move it all around per anyone's request to show the visual impacts. But it won't have, it'll still be a massing study. It'll have no openings, doors, windows on it. All of that is to be determined if we want to move forward on this site.
Councilor Bagley?
Your Honor, I would move to schedule a public meeting with the working group after the needs assessment is completed. If I get a second.
Second.
I think, it's a little, I don't know how long a needs assessment takes, but it's hard to design a building when you don't know how big the building needs to be. Likely it's going to be the same size force we have now, but we don't know that for sure. And I think it would be good for the working group to present in like that 2-hour meeting to, hearing council chambers to the community, and then everybody in the community that wants to give their suggestions and advice and ask questions has a chance to do that in a forum that's not so formal as this.
Yeah. I would also, in preparation for that meeting, members of the public who are interested in the process, I encourage them to go to the city's website and see the presentations we've done to date, so that when we all meet and have this discussion, we'll be that much more informed. Because as you know, we spend a lot of time going back and talking about what we've done over the past couple of years, and that takes a lot of energy and time. We've had a lot of public presentations describing the deficiencies in the station and what modern policing means today, and there's a lot of great information on the website. So I just want to put a plug in for the website to watch those meetings, look at the documentation, and it'll help for that meeting.
So when we expect that is in 3 months? Is that conservative or?
Maybe 4,
Okay.
getting the signal. Yeah.
So what is the hang up in terms of the needs assessment? Why does it take as long as it does? We haven't contracted with anybody, have we?
We're working on a contract now, so that's why we're trying to get the scope of work, make sure we've well-defined what we're looking for, so that's where we are right now.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I understand that we're not going to give a green light on any needs assessment without a needs assessment. I just am not confident that the needs assessment is necessarily going to change all that much. And I mean that from a standpoint of the conversations that I think are driving some of the massing that we have, or the building that I have, are conversations I'd like to have sooner than the needs assessment is going to be back, like the adjacencies in particular, and whether or not we can, if, it seems like there's two tracks here, at least from, as I understand. One, if this had come back with a 4-story building and it tucked back, to the building itself, and the view was not any different, we just built up over that slightly, I think broadly more support among the folks that really value the view and the corridor. So that it's not creates a situation where we're going to have to explain why the efficient or adjacencies are important. The second kind of point is to other questions that have remained at the $42 million price tag, and that's why do we need this much more space for a police department? I don't think that, I just think there's a lot of work that we could be doing in the interim, waiting 4 months to have the needs assessment back. I'm cognizant that things are not getting cheaper anywhere, and at some point we're not going to have, it's just going to be more expensive. So I would hopefully have the conversation of the work to date, the work product, the decisions that went into adjacencies, that went into where we are right now, and the decision to get out, because that's all work that's rear-facing, not forward-facing. I still think that there's a hill to climb to make sure from a investment standpoint that we are investing in a building that is serving the needs of the police force, and we have certainty around that. That's what I think the staffing needs study is going to accomplish. So I would hope that we could schedule this work product session before the staffing needs study is done, knowing that we're not taking action. It's a public meeting, and I think the public needs to know of all the work that has gone into this to date, and not simply wait until we have that other piece, knowing that we're not taking action based on the scheduling of this public meeting. Is that reasonable to the motion, or the Councilor Bagley?
I still think it's a little putting the cart before the horse. What if they come back and say you need a lot more social workers? That could fundamentally change the design and layout of the building potentially. I think having the assessment is a critical foundation to designing a good building.
Well, so there's also, like, I guess I'm just trying to think of the public and the public's ability to be involved in the conversation to date. And if there's a lot of folks that are very closely following this, and we tell the public we have to wait 4 months to have those conversations and to understand what has gone into this, I feel like there's an opportunity that's missed where we could just tell the public, hey, we're waiting on more information. And that's one way to kind of go down. But since it's not going to require more work or engineering resources to simply produce and explain how we got from where we had originally presented to where we are right now, I think that would be useful for the public to understand. And we'll go to Councilor Cook first, and then Peter Rice is looking to speak.
Thank you, Your Honor. I was just going to suggest that I think we can't make the decisions about massing until after we have a staffing assessment, because we really don't know what adjacencies we need, and we're really not clear. I know that you, Your Honor, think that we're not going to see many differences in a staffing study. I'm not confident that that's the case. So I don't share that view necessarily. But there's nothing that stops us from having an interim meeting where we have discussion with the public, where we present what has been done tonight and take public comment and listen to the public and the public's concerns prior to that discussion as a council after we get the needs assessment.
I would be agreeable to change
Yeah,
the
okay,
motion.
just so what we were putting together is not the work session, it was the public explanation of where we have gotten to with this packet right here and where we were before, which it's not the work session, it's a public explanation of how we got to where we are. Councilor Moreau is mouthing something that I don't
It's a
know.
long public presentation.
Councilor Tabor?
I was just going to say, we don't know the results of the staffing study. That's 4 months out. We do know why the other options failed and why the adjacencies are important. So we could explain what we do know, and have that be a public meeting that we go in depth and we look at why, for example, we can't just put it all in the back of the police station. And then have a subsequent meeting when we have the staffing study 3 or 4 months from now.
Seems reasonable. Okay, so we leave it that. Mr. Armini, did you have something else?
I just want to remind everyone that the space needs analysis is also something that's on the website, which is a very detailed document about the size of every single space. That could be scrutinized, and that could be something that's presented and gone through with a very fine-tooth comb. We could explain that in detail. That might be helpful during that meeting.
That would also be helpful. In terms of, the staffing needs, in terms of bringing to the space needs, my concerns on there being a dramatic difference in that. There could be a dramatic difference. I don't know. I don't know how we would have aligned to this staffing that's separate from what was before, unless we feel as though we don't need that any longer. So that's where I'm not optimistic that we're going to save a lot of police, man hours or FTEs there, but that's worth the conversation. But I do think, and so we have a work session that we will have, and we can schedule that for when we get that back. So that will be one vote that we can take. And if we can make an amendment, or not amendment, if we can include a public presentation on the working group in the next, based on availability of city chambers in the next 3 weeks, that would also be, if we could include that, does that seem reasonable? Is 3 weeks enough time to do that? A month? Well, if we go back to 4 months, we could keep the original motion, I guess, but.
I think a little bit more than 3 weeks would be good. We could do
6 weeks? All right.
In the near future.
In the near, okay, to be worked out and scheduled in the near future. So probably going to be in about halfway through. So we're not off with 4 months. That's kind of reasonable, but so in that time period to also have a public presentation specifically on explaining the work product that went in here. And in that time, we will discuss what is going to happen with the working group if it continues on in the fashion that it currently has or not. Okay. So can you make that?
I'm going to rescind my previous motion, and I'll make a new motion. My motion is to have a presentation from the working group in the near future to the council and the public.
We doing the other one too, or no?
And then after the staffing needs assessment is complete, to have a public meeting regarding next steps for the police station.
Second.
So is the second one a public meeting or a work session on that? Is it a council meeting? Is it a council session? I felt that the second one was a council.
Okay,
a
we
work
can make
session.
that a work session.
Okay. Okay.
As long as the public is free to be involved.
As is their right. Okay. Any other questions, comments? All right, we'll do a roll call vote.
Assistant Mayor Kelly.
Yes.
Counselor Tabor.
Yes.
Counselor Cook.
Yes.
Counselor Denton.
Yes.
Counselor Blaylock.
Yes.
Counselor Bagley.
Yes.
Counselor Moreau.
Yes.
Counselor Lombardi.
Yes.
Mayor McEachran.
Yes. All right. We are so far not into the agenda very much at all. All right. Okay. This is, we're on to the first reading of ordinances. This is literally the first thing after public comment on the agenda. First reading of ordinance amending Chapter 10, Article 6, Overlay Districts, Section 10.680, Gateway Neighborhood Overlay District, by establishing a new incentive overlay district allowing for higher density housing.
Your Honor, I make a motion that we move to pass first reading and schedule a public hearing and second reading to be held on October 21st, 2024 City Council meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? Councilor Moreau.
Under my name, I had said I was going to bring forward an update regarding the planning board meeting that we had last Thursday where we brought this forward. We have scheduled a public hearing for this at planning board on October 17th. So I'll be able to at least verbally bring you that recommendation for the October 21st meeting and what got discussed during the public hearing and the feedback that we got. Right now, there's been a general discussion about favorability towards it. There was a little bit of discussion that maybe down the road, after it's working, we decide whether or not in a land transfer, whether or not we want all the lands that might get donated in exchange for workforce housing to be within the GNOD, or if maybe some of it could be in the GNOD and then some of it may be outside, and that might be something that we keep in the back of our minds to look at as it's functioning, to see how it functions, and whether or not that might be a good possibility.
Councilor Tabor, thanks. Councilor Moreau.
And also under the assistant mayor's name and my name, we had a report from the Housing Committee. This was referred to them. And the Housing Committee voted unanimously to recommend that the City Council adopt the proposed Gateway Neighborhood Overlay District ordinance as presented. There was a good discussion, looked at it from a number of angles. One of our members said she's very excited, it's innovative, and she likes the payment in lieu option. One of our other members said it's a blank slate to create new neighborhoods. I think the majority of the Housing Committee, all the Housing Committee, felt that this could move the needle on our housing supply. And that's the fundamental thing, while also allowing us to get between 80 and 120 units in the GNOD area of below market rate housing. So the reception was very enthusiastic. There was some discussion about whether the land donation could be parcels outside the GNOD area, and also that the fees for the in lieu payments need to be made clear in black and white through the fee committee. That's a missing piece, and further development of the uses of the housing trust fund, and that's all work ahead that people saw.
Any other comments? Well, I look forward to the public hearing and second reading. I think that a member of public comment, looked at this and provided some feedback. I encourage them to bring that at the public hearing as well. But I'll say, in terms of the pushback that I have on this being rushed, is that I think that we spend a lot of time sometimes trying to figure out what's perfect in zoning, and kind of sometimes get in the way or don't anticipate something that a developer is going to do. So I like that we're moving on this, that it's, the conversations have been happening at land use for quite a while, and we have an opportunity to learn from this ahead of the master plan as well, to see where it could go from here. So we'll be supporting and really excited about this for a lot of reasons that I will spare everybody until second reading at least. All right. We can't do an all in favor, so we're going to do a roll call on this.
Assistant Mayor Kelly.
Yes.
Counselor Tabor.
Yes.
Counselor Cook.
Yes.
Counselor Denton.
Yes.
Counselor Blaylock.
Yes.
Counselor Bagley.
Yes.
Counselor Moreau.
Yes.
Counselor Lombardi.
Yes.
Mayor McEachran.
Yes. Sorry. Well, that was the last roll call. We just got, Assistant Mayor is going to retire under the weather, feel better, Joe, and we'll go back to regular non-roll calls. Next up, public hearing, second reading of ordinance and ordinance amending Chapter 1, Article 4, Section 1.412, Public Art Review Committee, existing text to be deleted in its entirety and replaced with a brief reference to a new section in Chapter 1, Article 17, relating to public art, and Chapter 1, Article 17, funding of public art, Sections 1.1700 through 1.1707, existing text to be deleted in its entirety and replaced with a new Article 17 retitled Funding, Review, and Acquisition of Public Art, inclusive of new sections 7.1700 through 1.1709. And we have a presentation.
Your Honor.
Not a presentation.
Yes, Your Honor, I'm going to invite up the Chair of the Public Art Review Committee, Chris Dwyer, to make comments on the changes in the ordinance.
Didn't even know she was there.
Thank you. Yes, Chris Dwyer, 600 Broad Street in Portsmouth. And basically, this is a proposal to consolidate and update a couple ordinances and policies. And we think that this will lend clarity to avoid some confusion and eventually result in more and better projects. So I want to speak to a couple of provisions in the ordinance and then also to an amendment that we have proposed. The changes, there are a lot of minor cleanup kind of changes, but I'm only going to speak to what I think are the substantive pieces. First, there's a change in the financial basis for projects that generate public art dollars, and that's about both raising the floor and the ceiling. So the range had been 5 million to that we want to raise it to a floor of 5 million and a ceiling of 30 million. And this is really just a matter of economics and inflation. It's been almost 18 years since we first had this ordinance when I was back on the council. And during that time, the fabrication, materials, construction costs, of course, have really gone up. So what this would mean would be the range of dollars generated would be from $50,000 to $300,000. So that's probably the most substantive change. Second, the ordinance gives more flexibility in use of funds in a couple of ways. First, the idea that 75% of the funds generated by a site would be expended on that site, and the remainder would be put in the Public Art Trust Fund, rather than all of the funds being associated with the site. And then the second flexibility is that the maintenance funds that are in the Public Art Trust are there without designation to a particular project. And this, because as you can imagine, maintenance costs are difficult to predict. A project might never require maintenance costs, and another project might require more. So this flexibility allows that adjustment. A third change is that we acknowledge that part of the committee's mission is to provide recommendations to land use boards about public art. And recently, the Planning Department and the HDC have both been gracious about acknowledging that park is the right place to gather perspectives and recommendations on the appropriateness of public art by private developers. And we have an increasing number of private developers that are proposing public art. We've got 3 things coming to us in our October meeting, for example, which we think is great. We want to encourage that, and we think park is the right first stop for that. And then finally, there are some additional provisions about procedures for recommending maintenance to Public Works and to the City Council, and also for deaccessioning art when it's no longer viable. Because some things are intended to be temporary, some things may outlive their usefulness, and it's time to kind of let them go. The amendment that we've put forth, and I think Councillor Cook will speak to, is a change in definition for the basis of public art. Right now, the basis is for buildings. It's for new buildings and rehab of buildings. And what we'd like to do is to change that language to capital construction projects rather than buildings only. And the reason for that is, when you think of it, sometimes the most appropriate places for public art are not buildings, but they're places like the skate park or the Prescott Park reconstruction, places that members of the public take children, take visitors, spend their leisure time. And it's really those kind of capital construction projects that right now would not be included because our language is buildings only. So those are the kind of the changes that are in the ordinances. The other pieces just bring those ordinances together and align definitions and make things consistent. Our committee has discussed and recommended all of these, and we know they've been to the governance committee as well. And with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions that you might have.
Any questions for Chris? Thanks so much.
Okay.
Councillor Cook?
Your Honor, I would like to suspend the rules and bring up item 15D1 under my name. That's the amendment that Chair Dwyer spoke to.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Your Honor, that amendment is to the language that you have in your packet. And I do have a slight addition to that language. I've been running it back and forth with our acting city manager and legal department to make sure that we adequately captured exactly the intent here. So the motion is actually to move to amend the current language in the Public Art Review Committee ordinance as follows. In section 1.1702, public art commitment, in the first sentence, replace the phrase all new municipal buildings or for the renovation of existing municipal buildings with capital construction appropriations for any public construction project, excluding roadways and utility infrastructure, but not excluding facilities such as pumping stations and treatment facilities.
Second.
Any discussion?
I just have a question as to whether or not this changes the ordinance at second reading enough that it has to be reposted, or are we good to make this amendment?
It would substantially alter the proposed ordinance such that it would have to be renoticed and go back for a second reading.
Okay.
Councilor Cook?
Your Honor, we had anticipated that, and upon adoption of this amendment, I would then move to not schedule third reading on October 7th, but to request to schedule second reading on October 7th.
And we feel that this is sufficient language, and the intent behind it is so that we don't draw beautiful art on sewer pipes, and we still get to draw beautiful art on skate parks. Feel that strong enough, this language? Okay.
Your Honor, the goal is truly just to make sure that we're putting art in appropriate places for public art. We're not planning on putting public art in the middle of roadways anytime soon.
So, Councilor Bagley?
All right, I agree with all this. We didn't have the public comment after the presentation.
We haven't had the presentation, so this was an amendment, I believe, and we'll then have a...
This was an amendment to the changes. We can still have public hearing if we need to, but we will have another second reading. So we can,
Is anybody here to
if we
speak on
adopt
this?
these changes,
Doesn't
we will
wanna come
need
back?
another second reading, so we can have public hearing. I don't know, that's up to the legal counsel if we need public hearing now and again on October 7th, or?
Yeah, I would recommend still going forward with the public hearing tonight and then having another one on the 7th.
Yep, okay. So, right, so this was part of... Yep, this was, so, presentation, this is under city council questions, I guess, and so we'll adopt this. Yep, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We will now open the public hearing. Anybody speak to, for, or against? If you don't want to come back the next time and you happen to be here, you can speak to it. Otherwise, we will schedule that for the 7th. Seeing no one rise, no one on Zoom, I will close the public hearing. Any additional questions? Councilor Cook.
Your Honor, I move to schedule second reading on October 7th, 2024.
Second.
Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Now we are on to acting city manager's items which require action. Get through any of these? No. we didn't.
Thank you. So the first item is a request to schedule a joint work session on the FY 2026, FY 2031 capital improvement plan. So I'd like to request that joint work session with the City Council and the Planning Board on Tuesday, November 12th, 2024 at 6 p.m. And at the work session, staff will present the CIP and answer questions from the Council and the Planning Board.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor? Aye.
Next item, which is consideration of referral of draft of the right to know policy to the fee schedule study committee. So during the 2024 legislative session, the New Hampshire legislature enacted HB 1002, which amends and affects the right to know law, which is the public records law of RSA 91-A. And that bill alters the way in which municipalities may respond to a right to know request in several ways. First, it makes it clear, which we already did, permits communication with a requester about modifying the scope of a request if it would help respond to the request more efficiently or affordably. And two, it immunizes municipalities from damages in a civil action if information exempt from disclosure is released in responding to a right to know request in good faith. And finally, in addition, the new bill allows municipalities to charge requesters a fee in certain circumstances after the governing body adopts a policy. So what you have in your packet is a proposed policy for the City Council outlining how we define what is a public record, and what is an electronic record, and then how this fee would be applied. I won't go through it all, although we're happy to answer questions. It does not change our current practice in terms of how we charge for paper copies of records, so that is still the $2 a first page and $1 thereafter. So this really just deals with electronic records. And what the new policy does, and why it will get referred to the fee committee if you so decide, which is after the first 250 electronic communications, the city does have the ability to charge a fee of requesting parties for producing those records. There are exceptions for the press, bona fide media outlets, to waive that fee, as well as for indigent and for other cases where there's a deemed significant public interest. So there's some flexibility in there. But it does help if the city council decides to adopt the policy to give us a little bit of ability to manage some types of requests that we get, particularly from out-of-state folks who don't quite have the same level of interest as our local residents. So I would recommend that the City Council move to refer the draft City Council policy, known as updates to the city's right to know policy, to the fee schedule study committee for a verbal report back, with hopefully adoption of the draft policy on October 7th.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? Counselor Cook?
I just had one question, a clarification on qualifications to fall into that exemption status. Would someone who's like a PhD candidate who's doing research on city government fall into that category, or no?
Would you like to?
Sure. I would. Staff Attorney Jennifer Smith prepared the memorandum and the associated policy, and I would. She's prepared to answer questions regarding the policy and the House bill.
Hi, thank you. With respect to the question of the PhD candidate, if there were records in the request that were over 250, such that this new policy would be triggered, I think what Suzanne, what the assistant city attorney, acting city attorney said is would apply. We would be able to speak with them, ascertain what the nature of the request is, help them narrow the scope, and if we were really in the land where it was so voluminous that it was extraordinarily expensive for that candidate, we could work with them. As it's been noted before, that the policy allows for flexibility.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Thank you, Jen, for all the work on this, and appreciate the potential that comes back from the fee committee that this cost is borne by taxpayers, be borne by those requesting, provided the caveats that are within the policy. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right.
Okay, next item, sale of surplus police vehicles. So the Portsmouth Police Department has a surplus of vehicles ready for auction. As in the past, the city's disposed the surplus vehicles through Gov Deals, an online auction site in which vehicles are sold to the highest bidder. That's our experience. We get better pricing there through other sealed bid processes. And so we are asking for City Council approval to move to approve the sale of the surplus police vehicles as presented.
Thank you, Mayor. Or City Manager, Acting City Manager, I move to approve the sale of surplus vehicles, police vehicles, as presented.
Second?
Any discussion? Councilor Cook?
I'm sorry to ask a question about this, but I was fascinated by the 2017 vehicle that has bad rear brakes, and why we're not just replacing the brakes on a vehicle that's so young?
So I know one of us internally asked that question, and we did get an answer back from the, I think from the chief, as I recall. Someone answered that question from your department. Would you care to speak to that particular vehicle?
I don't have the list in front of me of the exact vehicle, but if it's a 2017, is that a Crown Vic or is that a?
It's a Ford
It's a
Explorer.
Ford Explorer, yes.
Okay.
You got the VIN number memorized?
I will just state this, that when we get rid of police cars, they are at end of life. And if there's any life left in a vehicle, they generally go to DPW, puts them into service. So if they're not willing to take the vehicle and change the brakes, there's probably a lot more to it than just the rear brakes.
Thank you.
So that's helpful to know. So these, on these, and it could be helpful in the future, and Chief, you don't have to hang around for this, but when we have the known problems, if we could also include, I know this is more overhead, but if we could include replacement cost of the vehicle, because there's a delta in terms of it, we start losing more money on the replacement value of that, and an inflection point can certainly be the time to do service on the vehicle is when it no longer makes sense, and that's what here. But again, this was something that jumped out at me when read through the packet, and 2017 rear brake shot, that describes my Subaru. So just want to make sure that we're able to give that information for somebody that's looking through this packet and asking those questions of us. Just in the future, it's a little bit more work, but if it can be done as a part of the capital improvement plan, that would be fantastic. But all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Great. Next item, we have the acceptance of several easements for property located at 53 Green Street. So in July of 2021, the Planning Board granted a wetlands conditional use permit, subdivision, and site plan approval to Stone Creek Realty LLC for the demolition of an existing building and construction of a 5-story mixed-use building, as well as renovation of an existing parking area. As part of that approval, the Planning Board recommended the city accept the following easements. Greenway easement adjacent to the North Mill Pond, a greenway access easement to access the new greenway from Green Street, a wide pedestrian sidewalk easement along Green Street, a sewer line easement, and an access easement for water services. Each of these easements, with the exception of the water access easement, are shown in information in your packet. You also have in the greenway easement, as well as the greenway access easement and the wide pedestrian sidewalk easement, these are all for the benefit of the city in exchange for the density bonus incentives, permitting the new building to have a 5th floor where 4 are permitted. The sewer line easement accommodates any need to repair, maintain, and replace certain sewer infrastructure. And the water services access agreement will permit staff to enter the property for the limited purposes of turning valves and leak detection. The approval of a lot of these easements was delayed due to litigation. That litigation is resolved. So we recommend that the City Council move to authorize the city manager to accept and record the following easements over 53 Green Street in substantially similar form to the easement deeds contained in the packet. A greenway easement, a greenway access easement, a wide pedestrian sidewalk easement, a sewer line easement, and an access easement for water services.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? Councilor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just a question on the access easement for water services. It says that access to provide for the limited purposes of leak detection and similar infrastructure inspection services, and for access to valves for purposes of turning on and shutting off the municipal water service. What do we do if we have to do maintenance? Because wasn't this an issue when we did the Little Bay water line and we didn't have access rights for maintenance?
Do you want to answer that, or do you want me?
Either way, I mean, if I may, so the answer to that is that the difference here is that on private property, the water laterals are private infrastructure; they're not city infrastructure. But we have an interest in making sure that identifying any leaks where they may be. Is that on our water main, or is that on the private sewer lateral? And if so, being able to turn the valve to prevent city water from just leaking everywhere. So we're not accepting ownership of those private water laterals, but we do have an interest in performing those activities.
And a follow-up, so we're the grantee?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
We're the recipient of that easement, yes.
Okay. I thought the grantee was the person giving the easement.
Grantee is the person getting the easement, yeah.
All right. Any other questions? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, City Manager. Next up, we have the consent agenda.
Your Honor, I move to adopt the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And we've had the presentation on the community policing facility, email correspondence.
Your Honor, I move to accept and place on file.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next up, a letter from Christine Grolo, North Church of North, and then I messed up, North Church of Portsmouth, requesting a reduction or waiver of fees associated with the upcoming construction project at 2 Congress Street. Wait a motion, Councilor Bagley?
I don't see a motion in the agenda, so are we just making one on the fly here? Or do I have the, not a
I
good
think we're
agenda?
supposed to move to give, I'll make a motion that we move to give the city manager authority to authorize.
The city manager would need to know how much.
Okay.
Are we talking whole, half? That's why it's come to the city council without a recommendation, because this really is a policy decision on the part of the city council.
What would be normal? What would
The
we typically do?
the last time a church asked for a construction easement was the South Church, and they received a full fee waiver for the replacement of the slate roofs therein, and amounting to, I'm thinking like $12,000. But that part I don't remember. Kind of impressed that I remember the first part. But Councilor Bagley.
Your Honor, I move to authorize the city manager to provide a full waiver to the North Church of Portsmouth associated with the upcoming construction project at 2 Congress Street.
Second.
And just to speak to it quickly, like you said, we have a precedent for doing this, and the North Church is kind of the iconic visual of downtown Portsmouth. So I think we need to support maintaining that building as best we can.
Any other discussion?
Your Honor, also, I think it's important to note that our ordinances provide for fee waiver for nonprofit organizations.
Any further discussion? So this is for the full waiver. It has not been, we don't know what that cost is. I do know that the work that they're trying to do is to create, is to increase ADA access as a part of this renovation. It is in the center of town, so would be supportive of that as well. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next up, we have the PPMTV proposal for additional funding and change in policy. And we have a,
There you have their communication as well as the report back, which is in the informational
oh, it's back in
items.
informational.
Yeah.
Can we bring that forth to have you speak to that, Suzanne?
I'll move to suspend the rules to bring up the, sorry, where is it? Yeah, city manager's informational item 3. Under,
Second.
Yeah, item 17.
There was a second? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. So this is the informational items. Suzanne, do you mind summarizing for the all of us here and the folks at home that might not have read the packet?
Yes, so at the last city council meeting, there was a presentation from PPM TV requesting some relief from the city council relative to funding. There was a presentation sort of describing and identifying sort of their history, their path forward. And a request from the City Council was to give a report back and some history with regard to their request. In sort of taking that charge, I reached out to PPM TV after the last City Council meeting and asked for some definition in terms of the amount specifically that they were going to request, which we did not hear, at least I don't recall hearing at the last meeting, and also kind of request in terms of any specific policy changes that they wanted. And so you will see in their communication, which is the identification of an additional request for $48,000 for this funding year, and then a change in the current policy adopted by the City Council, pursuant to which they get a certain amount of money placed into the PPM TV, if you will, trust fund, after a certain amount is received by the city into the general fund as part of the franchise fees from Comcast. What has been identified, of course, is that those franchise fees from Comcast are decreasing over time, and as a consequence, there needs to be some planning and thinking about how PPM TV is going to go forward. So what the report does is provide some history in terms of when PPM TV was initiated, if you will, born. The initial policy of the City Council adopted in 2009, which was to put the first $360,000 of franchise fee received by Comcast every year goes to the general fund, and any remainder and overage above that into the trust. That has traditionally been well over $100,000 for the last few years, and so that fee is starting to decrease and will continue to decrease as folks cut the cord. There is no additional money that can be gotten out of Comcast for the franchise fee because we're already at the max under the law that we can get from Comcast. So provided a lot of background in the report in terms of the origination, did provide a summary of what some of the other communities are doing and how they treat their public access channels. Some communities elect to, as PPM TV has shared the last, fund a lot of their activities through the franchise fees. Other communities do not fund their public access stations really at all because there is no legal requirement to fund them, and there is an assumed cost on the part of municipalities to manage their rights of way in the franchise fee agreements. After kind of looking at the request from PPM TV, what staff recommended is that if the City Council is inclined to support PPM TV's request for additional funding for FY25, that the City Council could direct the city manager to provide $48,000 to PPM TV from the next quarterly franchise fee payment from Comcast. With this and no other change right now to the existing policy related to the treatment of franchise fees, there will be no impact to the taxpayer or the tax rate for FY25. This will resolve the immediate need for PPM TV for the current fiscal year, and it essentially makes available to PPM TV next month, roughly, the portion of the franchise fee that they would typically get sort of usually May, June, July, somewhere in there next year. So that is our proposal, and that as part of your budget process early next year, that you look at whether you want to change the current policy whereby the first $360,000 goes to the general fund and then the excess from the franchise fee goes into the PPM TV trust. That's really up for the City Council to decide, but we thought maybe that decision would be better made after we have kind of the results of the revaluation, we set the tax rate, and then the City Council has a policy discussion in, next year as part of its budget process.
And going to go to Councilor Bagley, but Suzanne, could you please speak to the some of the discussions that happened when the policy was first created, and the
Sure.
ability to use capital or to focus on capital infrastructure in lieu of the fees. If we missed that window as part of the renegotiation of the cable internet contract.
So, going back to 2009 when the policy was adopted?
Yeah, as I understood it, there was another conversation to build like a studio
Correct.
space and
Correct.
use some of the money in a capital way instead of an ongoing
Correct.
Way.
Yeah. Prior to the adoption of the policy in 2009, to take a portion of the excess from the council's perspective, franchise fees, and put them into trust for the operating costs, there was a discussion at the city council level in the year or two preceding that, looking at other ways to fund and launch this public access television station. And there was a lack of interest in kind of doing a direct appropriation or funding making a capital improvement. Now, there is a mechanism which some communities took advantage of when they launched their public access stations to get from Comcast sort of seed money, say, for example, $100,000 to help build a studio, but then all of that charge got pushed back onto the subscribers and would be paid back over a period of time as an additional charge. So there was, and there to some degree still is, a mechanism for those types of additional charges, but they're on top of the franchise fee, typically, or at least that's the way they used to be done. So you were just layering on to subscribers all of this additional cost. And so that kind of solution to kind of fund a capital, through a capital investment into a studio space was rejected, which is why in 2009, the path was, let's look for another option that wouldn't affect the tax rate, that would be not too burdensome on the subscribers, and so we'll set up a trust, and any amount that is above the 360,000 going into the general fund at the time, anything over that would just pour really into the trust, and then every year PPM TV could apply for that. The city also made available, of course, the South Meeting House. Now, that did come with conditions of maintenance, and I think there was certainly a lot more, in 2009, it was before we started to cut, before people were cutting the cord. And so there was a lot more optimism, I think, that those numbers at least would be fairly steady and provide a good resource over time. And of course, technology has changed and options have changed, and that's really kind of why we're in this space right now. Does that?
That's helpful. Yep. Councilor Bagley.
Your Honor, I would move that we authorize the city manager to provide $48,000 to BPM TV from the next quarterly franchise fee payment from Comcast. And if I get a second, I'll speak to it.
Second.
As everything was just discussed, the well is kind of running dry on this money. By giving them this more or less in advance on next year's fee, it gives them a chance for a soft landing and to find other funding sources going forward without having, the funding drop out suddenly on them.
Councilor Lombardi and then Councilor Blaylock.
I have a question for Deputy City Manager. The franchise fee also covers the production of Channel 22, is that right?
So the franchise fees flow into the general fund, and the general fund, through a variety of places, supports the production and operation of PPM TV. So a lot of those costs you'll find in the IT department, but you'll find, bits and pieces elsewhere as well. In terms of facilities.
I think about 22.
She's
Channel
meant
22.
Channel 22.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Channel 22, thank you.
It's just a
Yes.
good name,
Yes, it is a great name.
Okay.
So, yes.
Does that amount cover what we spend in the general fund?
So I amount that we roughly spend right now on Channel 22 is $224,000. And that is kind of inclusive of our facility costs. And then that does not cover, for example, my costs when I'm acting as lawyer on behalf of the city and negotiating the agreements with Comcast, or, as I was doing the other day, responding to residents who have issues with Comcast, and I'm the point of contact, and I follow up with Comcast, and they, make an extra effort to solve a problem. So for those of you who have Comcast issues, who are residential customers, I'm the person you call or email.
Good to know.
And then I follow up and try and get some action or resolution. And I also work with the Public Works Department. Sometimes we have rights-of-way issues with Comcast, as we do with other utilities and their poles or their infrastructure, and there's a coordination piece, which is why the franchise fee kind of assumes that there's some administrative costs to that, and that's also carried as well.
So the answer is no, basically.
Councilor Blaylock, then Councilor Tabor.
Thank you, Honor. I tried to reach out and meet with some of the board members from PPM TV and just try to understand the whole situation, that being that unfortunately these funds do have to come out of the general fund, which makes it hard for us because we have to weigh it against teachers and police officers and firefighters. But I do encourage any residents or people at Portsmouth that really have a passion for PPM TV and what they do. They do provide our community with a great service. And but I encourage any private donors to reach out to them, try to help them keep afloat. But yeah.
Councilor Tabor.
Question for the Deputy City Manager. So would it be fair to say the math works that the city takes in $360,000 and the combined costs for running the government channel are about $220,000? So there's about $140,000 that PPM TV feels they would like to see more of, but we would have to make the decision whether we take that out of the general fund.
That would be correct. The first 360, we generally record to the general fund, and then the excess goes to the trust, and it will be a policy decision. And what we thought is that policy decision on whether you want to make any changes is probably best made in the context of your budget process next year, which is why the stopgap of the 48 by just advancing sort of when we would typically, when they would typically come to us for more money, by taking it out of the next franchise fee payment. But I think it's a policy conversation within a budget process.
But I would support the motion tonight.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think that this is a good interim measure to get PPM TV the funding that they need now to continue operations. But I think it's also important for us to acknowledge as a community that this is a nonprofit organization, another arts nonprofit organization that needs support. And so I would encourage my fellow residents and citizens to consider becoming members at PPM TV, supporting PPM TV, because they're, like many arts nonprofits, having to change their model of funding as the world is changing around us. And as patterns of giving change, as technology changes, we're seeing considerable impact on our local nonprofits, especially our arts nonprofits. And hopefully we can find a positive landing point, as Councilor Bagley said, for PPM TV, because we'd like to see you continue for the long term.
Councilor Cook. I'll support this. I think the 2 points, in addition to the nice things that were said about PPM MTV and the folks that have been working on this, affects the reduction in funding, affects ourselves as a city and PPM TV. So, it's good that we're providing this stopgap for this year, and we'll take up the conversation next year. And I would encourage the efforts on the fundraising will go a long way in terms of those conversations. The But the broader point is this money is not going to stay around forever for us as well. So the same efficiencies that we're hoping that PPM MTV find, we need to find those same efficiencies, because this revenue is not going to be revenue for the city of Portsmouth in the foreseeable future. And so it's good, for the goose, good for the gander, I guess, that we take our own advice on the efficiencies, et cetera. But the reason we're here is just looking over the numbers, and thank you, Suzanne, for putting those, in stark relief. The amount of money that's gotten year over year went off a cliff this year. And so that's where I think that, not that you expect government to be forever, but to drop as much as it did from a year over year standpoint, I think the right thing to do in order to avoid having this go away completely is to make this vote tonight and, defer the revenue that the city would otherwise get from this to PPM MTV, so that we have another amount of time to figure out a better policy that works, and hopefully a better fundraising mechanism. And I would implore, again, from a standpoint of efficiencies that can be gained with other folks in the space of educating voters and the community around us, if there's creative solutions around, studio space that can come up, nonprofits, I find, always want, and this is not me saying I know anything more or I'm smarter, but I see a lot of nonprofits focus on getting that building and then realizing building maintenance sucks. And the city, for better or worse, we are in the building maintenance. We spend the money on it, as we've heard tonight at the police station. But we maintain buildings for a long term. We have the infrastructure to do so. That's a better place for us to support the nonprofits. That's what we've done at Community Campus. That's where I think, in terms of extending the reach of the city of Portsmouth, the things that we can't afford to pay on an operating expenditure basis, that we can expend on a building and maintenance. Those are the areas where I think that make the most sense for us to be in that place, and would like to hear all of the options on the table, even those ones that pass on costs, because I'm not sure how inflexible the ratepayers are when it comes to Comcast, and they are under pressure as well, and so would love to learn more about that, but that's a longer conversation. So appreciate this solution for this, and we'll support this. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, Suzanne, for taking that out of order. Next. Are we on to the council?
Yeah.
We can't be.
Yes.
All right.
Mayor.
Look at us. Only 9:30 here. All right. We have the appointment, so we're under the council appointment of Sean Clancy as a regular member and Jillian Harris as an alternate member to the Coast Board of Directors. This is just, I guess, giving you the heads up that this is going to happen in October. But that means that Ben Fletcher, I think, will be stepping down from that position. But I appreciate that Sean, with his economic development background, can talk about community or transportation. Appointments to be considered. Again, nothing that we're going to vote on. And I knew about that other one, that we weren't voting on that too. Reappointment of Mark Syracuse, Mary Lou McClellan, Erica Waganek to the Parking and Traffic Safety Committee. The reappointment of Robert Mahefka to the Economic Development Commission. And then the appointment of Brian Gibb to the Conservation Commission from an alternate to a regular member. And then sadly, we have the resignation of Adam Fitzpatrick from the Conservation Commission. And
Mayor, I move to accept the resignation with regret and to send a letter of thanks for his services to the city.
Second.
Well, I appreciate the work, Adam, a younger member on the Concom. I know that it's tough to balance all of that, and I appreciate the effort that you brought to bear on this. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. We have an update. So I don't know how. What's that?
Councilor Cook will give that up.
Okay, Councilor Cook, do you want to give the update from Assistant Mayor Kelly?
Yes, give me a moment to find it in my packet. Take me a second. Is it? Sorry, I don't have it pulled up in my
Yep,
packet.
that's, just as you wait to pull it up, this is the update from the Legislative Subcommittee and its recommendation to approve the New Hampshire Municipal Association's 2025-2026 proposed legislative principles and policies. And the committee met last week, and I know you were there.
Yes, thank you. The committee did meet last week on Friday, and we discussed the New Hampshire Municipal Association's legislative principles for this coming year and their legislative policy positions. We had a few recommendations for them. We asked that they add a new policy under land use policies, which you'll see in your packet, and we asked that they strike 2 policies under land use policies as well. And we will ultimately be presenting to them this. Hopefully the assistant mayor will be able to do that and will be feeling well, to be presenting to them later this week on those requests we have for them, but otherwise we approved the recommendations they have. With that, I have a proposed motion. I would move to appoint the assistant mayor or an alternate to act as a delegate at the New Hampshire Municipal Association Legislative Policy Conference, and move to accept and approve the New Hampshire Municipal Association's proposed principles and proposed policies for the 2025-2026 year, and floor policies as recommended by the Legislative Subcommittee, which includes our recommended changes.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Counselor Cook and Counselor Denton.
Your Honor, I move to allow the Climate Action Plan related capital improvement plan additions by the Sustainability Committee to be submitted past the current deadline.
Second.
And I'll speak to this real briefly. The Climate Action Plan was recently passed. The Sustainability Committee's ordinance allows for it to give the City Council guidance on implementation of the capital improvement plan. And under the new capital improvement plan timeline, the Sustainability Committee would not have had time to provide input on the CIP until next year. So this motion is to allow the Sustainability Committee to make recommendations past the deadline for capital improvement plan recommendations.
Seems reasonable. Any other discussion? Counselor Blaylock.
I appreciate the motion up front, and I also would I hope that the 10 submissions by the middle school students are considered as part of that process.
They can be considered.
Thank you.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, we've had Counselor Cook, your Public Art Review Committee ordinance amendment. Counselor Bagley.
I got a lot tonight, Your Honor.
You.
You do. I move to approve and accept the action sheet and minutes of the September 5th, 2024 Parking Traffic Safety Committee meeting.
Second.
I'll just speak briefly to it. There's 2 items that I think would be of note. The first one is the sidewalk improvements on Congress Street. There were some articles in the paper about it. Basically, what we'll be doing is digging up the sewer pipes and water pipes and all of that in that vicinity as part of the Fleet Street project. And when we put everything back together is a ideal time to make any changes to the surface of the roadway. So we're not doing this just to change the sidewalks. We're doing all of the construction. And when we put everything back together, if we want to make the sidewalks wider, that's the most cost-effective time to do it. And the second thing is on Cass Street. Those of you who go to Hannaford's and then drive down Cass and turn onto Middle Street a lot will know that it's a rather challenging turn to make, especially a left-hand turn, and that has to do with parking. There's 4 parking spaces, 3 going towards town, 1 going away from town that we're proposing to eliminate. Those are parking spaces that are heavily used. So what we are doing is we're putting flyers up in the households and apartments nearby so that they'll know about the site walk and that we're looking to address this at the next parking, traffic, and safety meeting. But it is a rather dangerous maneuver to try and pull out there because of the sight lines.
You said you're doing a site walk? Is that
Yeah,
what you said?
yeah, we typically do a site walk when we make changes like this so the committee can,
Do you know when?
I
In case people ask us?
might be up to.
So on the Congress Street sidewalks, what is approving these minutes? The minutes say under new business that this would go forward, and then Peter Rice moved to have staff continue to develop the proposed changes and incorporate. So when is the final approval of this? Would
So-
that be this meeting?
No, in a future meeting, Dave DeFos's and Peter Rice's team will come back and say, this is what we're proposing with more technical drawings,
Okay.
having gotten the feedback from us, and then we would approve it, but ultimately it always comes to the council for
Okay.
final approval.
Got a
But we're
couple more,
we're a
but-
ways off. I think this is a 2-year out project.
Okay, so we're going to get a little break?
Yeah. Yep.
Construction right there on that corner. That's awesome. Okay, good. All right. So just for folks at home, we're, by approving this and the minutes from this, we're approving the ability to go do more work to see if this makes sense. And it does, if we are going to do anything there, we should do it at the time when we're doing the pipes to save the money.
Exactly.
Got it. All right. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
All right, number 2, request for first reading of amendment to Chapter 7, Vehicles, Traffic, and Parking, Article 10, Towing, Section 7.1004, Towing or Immobilization of Motor Vehicles for Non-Payment of Parking Fines. And I move to request first reading of the ordinance to be held at the October 7th, 2024 City Council meeting.
Second?
And very briefly, what this would allow us to do is put one of those bright orange stickers on the side of your car if you're about to get booted, and that gives you a week's notice before we put the boot on. So this just gives people a chance to talk to the parking department before their car gets booted.
Those stickers are nasty. They're hard to get off your window.
Probably John's had one.
Had one out at P.
Okay, and then the only question that I had on this was, what are the changes in parking clerks? How does that, what does that mean for the city or somebody that could be booted?
So I think what happens now is we have to send registered mail before we boot you, but people typically don't open that mail, so they don't know that they're about to be booted. So by putting a sticker on the car, it's much more likely that they'll be able to address the issue before they get the boot, so to speak.
Okay.
It's more of a modernization of the alert system, I guess, sort of like what we did with the snow line about a year ago.
Okay. And this is to set up first reading?
That's
All in-
correct.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
All right. I move to approve the renewal of the valet parking license agreement for Parade Residence Hotel LLC.
Second?
And these two valet licenses are for a street in town that is technically a private street, but the city kind of runs we have a agreement with that street where we do the parking enforcement and collect the revenues, and then the revenues are used to maintain the street, because we want to make sure that, because everybody assumes it's a public way, that it's maintained to the standards of the city and not left to private parties.
Any discussion? Councilor Morrow?
I just have a question regarding, so where do the valets park the cars? Is it on their private property?
I have no idea.
Just thought we should possibly know.
Possibly Peter Rice knows?
Does it matter, I guess,
I
in
guess it
terms
doesn't
of?
matter, but we're the ones giving him permission and the license to do it, so that's why I thought we should possibly know.
We're giving them permission to use a
Street.
part of a street that they have given to, that we have an easement over, is that right?
Yeah, it's a street they own, but we maintain. It's rather confusing.
It is rather confusing.
Oh, Pete was going to tell us where the cars go.
I'm not going to tell you where they all go, but they have their own parking lot, unsightly parking garage. So usually they're just moved to those spaces. They're not allowed to move them onto city streets. They have their own, the
You
private
know that
street.
we're going to get that question. That's why I asked.
Yeah, no, it happens every time we renew it. So.
Thanks.
All right. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, we went through Council Moreau's update.
One more.
Oh, you have one more.
Your Honor, I move to approve.
Oh, the other valet parking
renewal of the
license.
valet parking license agreement for Port Walk HI LLC.
Second?
And this is basically just the other side of the street.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Counselor Moreau, we have gone
I'm
through
done.
that. And we have the approval of grants and donations. We have an acceptance of historic cemetery donation in the amount of $2,500.
I'll move to accept the donation from 8KPH LLC in the amount of $2,500 to support restoration work at the North Cemetery.
Second.
Counselor Bagley.
I think it's worth a shout out to Susan Sterry, who facilitated this donation. She's done a lot for our cemeteries these last couple of years.
Certainly has. Yeah. And she got definitely stuck in. Appreciate that Suzanne Woodland is here with us tonight, because that cemetery committee, Suzanne has spent a fair amount of time working with that, but it's just a testament to when people are willing to solve a problem, that they get solved. So appreciate to Sue Sterry and to Suzanne Woodland here. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Acceptance of fire department donation in the amount of $100.
Your Honor, I move to accept the donation from Alan Hawthorne in the amount of $100 to be used at the department's discretion.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. And next, Counselor.
I just wanted to point out to anyone who hasn't seen the packet, there's a wonderful story that goes along with this donation. Again, thank you to our fire department.
Yeah, it's a nice letter. Acceptance of police department grant for the New Hampshire Department of Safety in the amount of $26,300.
Your Honor, I move to approve and accept the grant for the police department as presented.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All right. And acceptance of the police department donation in the amount of $3,200.
Your Honor, I move to approve and accept the donation for the police department as presented.
Second? Just really quickly before, it's, I think, to note that the Honor Guard is not something that's necessarily taxpayer funded, but through private donations. When this individual learned of that, she made a donation to that effect. Hopefully, this serves as an opportunity to encourage more people to do the same. And thank you for all the folks that do show up on sometimes a very tough day. So appreciate that. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we have some.
Informational items. All right, I can provide the quick update from Karen Kennard's last meeting with the PDA. It was a relatively light agenda with a discussion of ARPA funding, allocation to the Portsmouth Fish Pier Replacement Building. More to come on that in the October PDA meeting. Second item, the airport has seen numerous heavy military transport missions supporting several efforts in the region. Through July of 2024, there have been over 60,000 emplanements, projecting over 100,000 by the end of the calendar year. And finally, the terminal upgrades are set to be ready for use by the traveling public by Thanksgiving. So there's that one. Next one, revaluation. So here is the update. So as you know, in accordance with state law, the city has completed a revaluation of all real property for the 2024 tax year. The appraisal firm Vision Government Solutions was hired to complete the task for all properties throughout the city. Notices were mailed out to residential property owners last week. Notices to commercial property owners will likely be mailed at the end of this week. The new values indicated in the notice reflects property assessments as of April 1, 2024, using sales within the city over the past 1 to 2 years. The new assessed value will be utilized for the December 2024 tax bill. By way of further update, should property owners have questions and wish to discuss the new value, the notice does include details on how to schedule appointments to have that informal hearing process with a representative of Vision Government Solutions. We have already, no surprise, taken a number of calls in the assessing department and have, provided information to folks who have questions, and we're just encouraging folks to read carefully the information provided, and there is an opportunity on our website to just click a button and it will take you right to the opportunity to schedule a meeting to review your assessment. And all of those meetings are being held, the assessment meetings, the informal meetings are being held here at City Hall, just like they were, for those of you who were around the last time we did this, so right here in City Hall. So we will have, as the assessor has, conveyed earlier this month, we're going to have some new tools available to help assist property owners in researching values and to increase transparency for the public. So do see the assessor's page on the city website. It does contain additional information on property sales and values and a dashboard to help filter and sort and kind of get information specific to your neighborhood. Additionally, the site will have an estimated tax calculator. That tax calculator will be up live, hopefully either later this week or the beginning of next week. Right now, we're still finishing up the commercial values, and until we finish that, we can't set the tax rate and activate the tax calculator, but we're moving as fast as we can. And so hopefully end of this week or early next week, we will have that tax calculator, and that will help folks, I think, better understand the impact of the assessment.
Suzanne? Excuse me. Do we have the information from the state at this point? No. No, that comes later, right?
Yeah, that.
Much later.
Much later,
Yeah.
December.
Are you good with that answer? The information from the state comes later?
No.
Nathan Lenny.
Good evening, folks. Nathan Lunny, Deputy City Manager, Finance and Administration. It's the first time I think I've had a chance to say that, so thank you very much. I just wanted to make sure that we clarified. We're a month out probably from actually setting a tax rate. Okay. We're talking about an estimated number.
Thank you.
So a lot of the numbers you're asking about, no, we don't have meals and rooms. We don't have a lot of those figures yet, but within reasonable bounds. We simply don't have all of the commercial value, so it can't divide yet by any sure number to come up with a reasonable estimate. But as soon as we have that done, then the calculator will be up. And I know that a lot of residents, a lot of residents would really appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we don't need to cover the report back on PPM TV. So I've got update on the accessory dwelling unit handbook. So the accessory dwelling unit handbook is in its final stages of completion. The design consultant's work was recently completed in August, and those architectural designs and renderings are being integrated into the proposed handbook. The final draft of the handbook will be ready by the end of September, early October. And then I have one other item, informational item, the last minute, which is next Monday evening, probably starting somewhere around 11 p.m. to midnight, we will begin to see the demolition of the State Street building.
The Times building.
So there will be a lot of notice that is going out to abutters. We'll be doing our usual kind of communication. There will be a loss of power because we'll have to shut down power as well as streets. Most of the work will take place then from midnight to 6 a.m. And after that, there'll be about a week of transporting materials off the site. So figured you would appreciate the heads up. And like I said, we do have a number of means that we're going to be employing to make sure that those who are most impacted will have good notice of this disruption, and also to the general public.
Thank you, Suzanne. Anything else under miscellaneous? That technically wasn't under miscellaneous, just slid that in, but is there anything on miscellaneous? No? I'll now await a moment or a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Good night, Portsmouth. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.